Definitely William's work.
Identify yourself.
Annette Birkin.
She's who we're looking for?
Not much time. Need to dispose of it.
We're here for the G virus.
That's not gonna happen.
I'm warning you, Doctor.
Oh, yeah.
Annette Birkin is one of the most tragic and at the same time culpable characters that Leon and Claire will encounter during the events of the game Resident Evil 2. One of the administrators at Umbrella's Nest facility in Raccoon City, Annette and her husband William had been working together to perfect what they would dub the G virus. Publicly, of course, this facility and the secrets held within didn't exist. But off the record, this research would consume her life, eclipsing her marriage and oftentimes even her daughter, Sherry.
Sherry, I told you, I cannot leave here until my work is done.
That's what you always say.
Sherry?
Why didn't you stay in the house? It was safe.
The story of Annette Birkin as we know it begins with her formal education, which would take her into the medical field of virology. A career path which would eventually lead her into the employment of Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. And while we don't know much of Annette's early years with the organization, we do know that she would eventually be placed at a research facility in the Arklay Mountains, working closely with the head of research there, a man named William Birkin. Annette and William would work closely together over the next several years, and likely through admiration of each other's intellectual abilities, a romance would soon begin to blossom, leading to a wedding in the mid-1980s and a daughter shortly after that. However, while on the surface, these two may have seemed like your typical everyday family, underneath the facade, they were anything but. In 1988, William would discover what would become known as the G virus, a discovery that would earn the full attention of the higher-ups at the Umbrella Corporation, that would begin to funnel money into the research and evolution of this new virus, creating an entirely new facility known as Nest, which would primarily be dedicated to Birkin's research into G. Many of the staff at the Arklay Mountains facility would be transferred to this new project, Annette being one of the first among them. Publicly, this underground Umbrella laboratory, dedicated to the research and development of bioweapons, was labeled as a conspiracy. But, in truth, dozens of researchers just beneath Raccoon City worked tirelessly to understand and improve these dangerous viruses and creatures that they themselves had created. William and Annette being chief among those working around the clock to enhance their precious G. Of course, they still had to keep up appearances to curtail any suspicions of Umbrella's true intentions, but above everything else, their job was their life, and it consumed all.
I couldn't do it. He was your husband.
Honestly, we were more married to our work than each other.
But what about Sherry?
As a result of her obsession with her work, Annette's relationship with her family would become very detached. Like her, William's life revolved around his work, leaving little time for the two outside of it to ever really connect. But the true tragedy was her relationship with her daughter, Sherry. While we're not exactly privy to the toll of the Birkins' work obsession on their relationship with their daughter, we do know that they would often choose work over involvement in her life, no doubt causing a sense of resentment in the young girl who was often neglected and isolated. However, that's not to say that Annette and William didn't love their daughter. And while they may have let work eat into that relationship, they still cared for her safety. A fact that would be proven in September of 1998, when souring relations between William and Umbrella would reach a fever pitch. With distrust between the two parties rapidly escalating, William had made plans to leave the corporation behind and sell his research into G to the US military in exchange for asylum for his family and himself. However, before he could secure his deal, Umbrella would learn of his treachery. They would send in a team of operatives from the Umbrella Security Service to apprehend the Birkins and retrieve the virus. But when complications arose during the extraction, William would be left on the brink of death, resulting in a turn of events that would shake Raccoon City to its very core.
This is my life's work. I'm not handing over anything!
We have our orders, Dr. Birkin. I'll ask you one more time. Hold your fire!
Hearing the commotion of the USS and William's conflict, Annette would rush to investigate the disturbance, finding her husband covered in wounds that should have killed him, and a vial of used G laying on the ground that was keeping him alive. Annette knew that William would soon be gone, knew better than almost anyone what the G virus was capable of and how drastically it would change him into an unrecognizable monster. But, all the same, she couldn't bring herself to do what needed to be done. Annette let William leave the laboratory, turning him loose on Umbrella's operatives and Raccoon City at large. Her feelings for the man that she had once loved, the father of her child, kept her from doing what she knew was right. But even with the guilt tugging at her, the opportunities to learn from what G could do in the wild were simply too fascinating to ignore. William would go on to unleash the T-virus on Raccoon City in the wake of his destruction, and Annette would follow closely behind him, attempting to learn about his mutations and what he was now capable of. She knew that William had to be stopped, and believed that research into his transformation was the key to doing just that. And even as her daughter Sherry found her in the sewers underneath the city, Annette didn't waver in her need to put an end to the monster that she'd helped to create. Annette is a complicated person to understand. A woman who's dedicated so much of herself to her research that she almost allows it to eclipse her emotions for her family. Annette was a slave to her work obsession, but she didn't help create these monstrosities in the hopes of setting them free on the masses. She was simply fascinated by the process. And while there is no denying that she made many mistakes during her time with Umbrella, in the end, she managed to pry herself from her obsessions and finally see what her work was costing her.
Don't worry about me. Take my daughter to safety. I'm sorry, Sherry. For everything. Your life is what is important.
We can't just leave her here.
You're right, we can't.
Attention, unauthorized removal of a level 4 virus detected.
What does that mean?